Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. What has faithful Catholics, as well as non-Catholics who are men of goodwill, so bothered in their core about this election is one simple thing: the potential conquest of evil over truth on a grand scale. Of course, we know that at the end of the world, or at each person's death, truth is victorious, but we aren't living at the moment of the end of the world right now. At this present moment, the forces of evil have so well organized themselves and brought their power to bear, focused on the defeat of Trump, that a temporal victory by them would be devastating. It would at least temporarily crush the spirits of good people everywhere. When you stop and think about the considerable forces arrayed against Trump, it's truly troublesome. There is not a single power that has not aligned against him. And remember, it's not really Trump himself who's their target. It's what he says and promotes. Sure, they probably don't like him personally either, but that's not the point. What they hate about him is his frankness about their evil. So evil has collectivized and is on the road to conquering. At least that's what it appears to be. There's so much misinformation out there, spread by an evil media devoted to destroying the truth, that you don't really know what to think, who to listen to, what's real, what's not, what's a good guess. And when it comes to polls, even considering that the vast majority were pretty wrong in 2016, this year's a different story. There are a few things the seasoned poll watcher looks for when he's assessing a poll. Here's a sample of those things. What's the margin of the lead? Has one candidate breached the 50% mark and sustained it for a while? What's the sample size? What's the margin of error? Were those polled likely voters or just registered voters? What was the distribution of those polled among Republican, Democrat, and Independent? Those are all key questions, and here's the concern as of today. So as nearly all the polls right now are beginning to show what looks like is shaping up to be something of a Biden landslide, it would not be wise to simply say, oh, well, they're all wrong, nothing to see here, folks, and so forth. Now, one small caveat before we go on to the major point. Every poll begins with an assumption about voter turnout. They build their entire projection based on a somewhat educated guess about how many people will actually vote. Laying aside the technical aspects of how they arrive at that projection, suffice to say their entire prediction, the model they build, rises and falls on that guess. If a larger than assumed number of voters turn out, a surprise turnout it's called, for one candidate or the other, then the pre-election polls all go out the window. But of course, there's no way to know that until Election Day or afterwards. So today, we have to go with what's in front of us. And from a spiritual point of view, we have an either-or situation. Let's go with the Biden landslide scenario. Either God is whittling down his army, ensuring that everyone understands victory would be impossible without him, like he did with Gideon, who he sent to attack and defeat the Midianite camp. Recall, Gideon started with an army of 32,000 soldiers, and God told him to keep cutting it down. It was too big. Lose more soldiers. You haven't lost enough. Lose even more. Eventually, Gideon only had 300. And of course, it was then God who said, okay, you can attack now. The point being, no one could look at that battle victory and ascribe it to anyone else other than God. So, we might have something like that going on here. Or we could have the following scenario. The church is in desperate need of cleansing. The crooked hierarchy has to be purged. They have to be swept from office. Nothing these men, many of whom are straight up wicked, have encountered on an earthly level has dislodged them from their evil and their cowardice. The church is being destroyed on their watch. So, since nothing human seems to have any impact, God is allowing to come to power those who will launch a full-scale persecution against the church, where these men will be simply killed or imprisoned. All their influence, all their power will be simply taken away, not to mention their wealth. And that will be that. And no, even though they have been complicit in bringing about the fall of Western civilization, they will not be spared by their fellow Marxists. They will be executed because they will no longer be useful to the cause. And they will not die as Catholic martyrs, but Catholic traitors who fell victim to their own evil designs. Now, of course, this scenario will entail massive suffering for Catholics, up to and including death. Death is the currency Marxists traffic in. Always has been, always will be. The world, as we have grown accustomed to as Catholics, will not be the same. In fact, that world is gone. A Biden victory will create a culture of hate aimed at faithful Catholics because of who their father is. Satan hates the church, and once he has secured power for his offspring, he will then use them to turn on the church, and the blood will begin flowing. As we said, however, this may be the only way left of purifying the church of the wicked men in the hierarchy. We are not a church unaccustomed to persecution and martyrdom, but we as a contemporary people are very unaccustomed to it. Many would apostatize in such a scenario because in reality they have already apostatized, thanks to a hierarchy that has lost supernatural faith. So it will be one of these scenarios, either a great shock or a necessary outcome given the circumstances. Whichever it is, because it will be one, pray and prepare to respond accordingly. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.